good morning, and you're welcome back to Ireland's Weather Channel, bringing you our latest live studio forecast here from Ireland's Weather Channel HQ in County Offaly. This is the latest update in terms of what is becoming potentially a rather significant storm that we're likely to see as we go through Friday. Now, there's still a great deal of uncertainty, and we're going to talk you through that uncertainty and try to make sense of the various weather models that we're looking at the moment and see exactly where those differences of opinion are starting to emerge in terms of the exact track and also in terms of the intensity of the storm that we're likely to see on Friday. Now, when we say likely to see, we know that it's going to be within the vicinity of Ireland. We just are trying to nail down that exact track, but we'll do our very best to explain all of that. But before that, I just want to thank everybody who's signed up for our Patreon so far. We will be sharing this video later in the day across on Facebook as well as means of a teaser to show everybody exactly what it is we're doing on our Patreon. But thank you so much to everybody who's signed up and subscribed so far. It really makes all of this possible. Now, back to the weather situation at the moment. And if we take a look at the satellite, if we look across the Atlantic basin at the moment, there's a number of features that we can pinpoint. The first two that might jump out, and I'll talk about ourselves in a moment because this is going to impact our weather as we go through the week. The first two items that I want to point out are these two systems here. This is Hurricane Humberto, still a major hurricane. It's a Category 3 storm, wind speeds sustained at 195 kilometers per hour at the moment. And here we have Tropical Storm Imelda as well. Now, these two storms, they're both expected to make their way gradually to the northeast over the next while. And there's likely to be a little bit of interplay between these two systems as they almost kind of coalesce around each other. There is the potential for some of the energy from Imelda being transferred across into Humberto. And ahead of Humberto as well, there's likely to be an area of low pressure that could be absorbed by Humberto as it makes its way across the Atlantic and transitions away from being a hurricane into an extratropical system at that point in time. Now, of course, we need to pay close attention to that because the jet stream at the moment is feeding up from this southwesterly direction. So as that storm moves out across the Atlantic and undergoes its extratropical transition, it is likely to get caught up in that jet stream. And as it crosses the jet stream, as it exits that left exit zone, it could very well intensify into a deep area of low pressure. For ourselves today, of course, we've rather overcast conditions across the country, low cloud in some parts, some one or two sunny spells breaking through at the moment as well. Generally speaking, cloud is going to increase as we go through the day today, and that is going to lead to outbreaks of rain spreading from the southwest and west. So a rather overcast, inclement day, but feeling quite mild, as we said, with that southwesterly airflow in place. And that's really how we keep conditions into tomorrow as well. But now let's start to take a closer look in terms of the exact details that we mentioned about these particular systems. So if we turn on our hurricane tracker at the moment, we can see quite a number of systems actually quite active, both in the Atlantic and then also in the Pacific Ocean as well. But it's Humberto and Imelda that we're concerned with, and especially Hurricane Humberto. So if we click on Humberto, we can see at the moment wind speeds sustained 185, been downgraded slightly. It is weakening as it pushes out across those colder waters. We can see the cone here. Now that gives us an indication of the exact track. And if I zoom out on the map as well, that will start to show us that expected path of Humberto over the next while. If I go out, you can just about see Ireland up here in the top corner behind me. But the storm itself is expected to move to the northeast initially, and then more so in an east-northeast direction across the Atlantic. It loses its tropical features by the time it gets to here, which is likely to be during the latter part of tomorrow into Thursday. But at that point, it starts to transition into that extratropical system. Now, as we mentioned, we do need to pay close attention to this, and we'll just look at one of our other apps here to show us exactly why we are concerned. This is the latest pressure charts that we have available at the moment. Now, this is at the time of recording. If we move on towards Thursday, we'll get a better idea of what we're talking about then in terms of these systems. And it's worth mentioning too, on Thursday, we can't lose sight of the fact that an area of low pressure on Thursday is expected to pass by the west coast. It's deepening as well as it passes the country, so it is likely to bring gale force winds to Atlantic coastal areas from Mizenhead right the way around to Mallinhead and also across to Fairhead as well in County Antrim. So gale force winds in the west as we go through the second half of Thursday, and with that some very heavy rainfall, the risk of localised flooding in places, and we will be issuing weather warnings for that later on this evening in our evening update, because we do expect somewhere between 40 to 60 millimetres of rain possible in some parts, falling in a short space of time. That will lead to some flooding concerns. But let's take a look again, as we mentioned, about these storm systems. So we're talking about the remnants at this point of Humberto, and at that point on Thursday at 10 a.m. we can see it situated out in the Atlantic. If we fast forward by 24 hours, look how that system has now moved and it's deepened quite considerably. So if we go back in time, how much is that deepening? It's going from a 988 right the way down 24 hours later to a 979. Very deep and deepening all the while as it approaches. This is the GFS model that we're looking at, and we'll talk through some of these various model outcomes. So the GFS has the system deepening as it approaches. It's situating the centre of that low just off the northwest coast of Ireland, bringing the strongest of the winds right the way across the Midlands into parts of East Connacht, into parts of Ulster and parts of North Leinster. That would be based on the GFS track from this morning in terms of its location. If we look at the ICON model, it shows something different. It shows the system a little bit more to the south, slightly weaker, but deepening as well as across the country and bringing more so concerns from heavy rain in that situation and strong winds. The GEM, another European model, has the low very deep at 965, situated again just to our northwest with very strong storm force winds into parts of Connacht, much of Ulster, and into parts of the Midlands as well. That's one of the stronger models that we're looking at the moment. And the ECMWF, and I'm going to go back here because I'm going to show you some of the headaches that we have to deal with as forecasters and give you a better understanding as to kind of why we issue the forecast at the times that we do and why sometimes they're upgraded or downgraded. This is the latest model from this morning. So the ECMWF is showing that that system is again going to situate itself just off the northwest coast of Ireland, and that centre is moving that direction. So the strongest core of the winds in the ECMWF, the European model this morning, does make impact with many parts of Connacht into the Midlands and also up into parts of Ulster in a track very similar, it must be said, to that of Storm Éowyn, and even in a comparable category in terms of the strength. Some of the winds forecasted from the ECMWF this morning showed gusts off the west coast of up to 200 kilometers per hour, which was very similar to those modelled during Storm Éowyn. Now, there still is 72 hours out, and we must stress the importance in that, because look at the difference. When I put the timestamp on to 4 o'clock, this is bringing in yesterday evening's model run at 1600 hours as opposed to this morning. So watch the difference in terms of its track. Yesterday, the system was taking it more to the northwest. It deepens it more by doing that, down to 944 hectopascals, but it keeps the strongest of the winds away from Ireland in that scenario. Down to 938 if we move on even to 7 o'clock, and probably even a little lower again, 935 by the time it gets to 10 o'clock. Now, I don't want to cause confusion with this. What we're showing with this is the difference that we are likely to have seen in terms of those models and the way they've changed. The ECMWF has now gone away from that solution where it takes it to the northwest, and it brings it more into play across Ireland, deepening that area of low pressure as it pushes close to us and bringing with it that risk of really significant winds. In terms of the areas at the moment that we're most concerned about, and we're going to take a look at our Google Maps with this now, and we can put on our little graphic here. So what we're going to do first and foremost is talk through the different scenarios that are in place in terms of the likely track. And we're going to zoom out a little bit first, are we? We will, yes. So I'm just going to take this off quickly for a sec. And if we zoom out, that'll give us a better understanding of the exact track that we're talking about, because I really want to explain this in a little bit of detail. So if I get my little pen up here now, we should be able to see that feature. Yeah. So we're going to show you the different tracks at the moment. So most of the models yesterday were taking the system on a trajectory a little like this, where it was taking it up along the west coast. The strongest of the winds then in that scenario would typically be found within this range here. So in that scenario, the strongest of the winds would have been kept to the west coast. We still would see strong winds, but the very worst of the winds wouldn't make impact across Ireland. However, what we've seen with this morning's update is now that this system is likely to take something a little more of a track like this. That brings it sufficiently close that the strongest of the winds could well impact this part of the country here. Okay? Now, looking at the models this morning, as we said, wind speeds, generally speaking, at the moment are forecast at the upper end, up as high as they were during Storm Eowyn. In a more likely scenario, they're likely to be a little bit lower than that. So somewhere between about 140 to 180 kilometers per hour in the very strongest scenarios, that is to be said. The models, some of them indicate winds of up to 200 kilometers per hour. They're probably outliers, and I would say somewhere between 140 to 180 is what we're looking at in terms of the outliers at the moment. If we were to see winds of that magnitude, I'll zoom back in, then again, we're likely to see upper level weather warnings in place across many parts of the west and northwest of the country, with the potential for red level warnings based on this morning's run for anywhere within this zone here, based on this morning's model run. So that's what we're faced with at the moment. That's the concerns. That's the uncertainty in terms of the models. But what we can say is, in summary, we do see the models now favouring a track that brings the risk of storm force winds to many parts of Connacht, Ulster and into parts of the Midlands. That has changed since the overnight scenario where it was keeping the strongest of the winds offshore. They now look very much likely they could impact us during the second half of Friday and into Friday night. And this is certainly a situation and a storm that we need to pay close attention to. We will hear a lot of, I suppose, conversations in the media over the next couple of days about this storm and comparing it to Eowyn and that. At the moment, there's 72 hours of a difference. As we've seen, the difference a model run can make is huge in terms of its locations. Now, that's quite a jump, even in terms of a model change. So there is uncertainty, but there's an increasing likelihood that we will see stormy conditions on Friday. We will be sure to keep you posted on that here at Ireland's Weather Channel. Thank you very much again for tuning in this morning to our Patreon. We'll be back in the afternoon with another update. Stay tuned for more. And if you know anybody else that likes the weather, is passionate about it, or depends upon a good weather forecast, then you might recommend our Patreon and get them to sign up as well. But thank you so much for tuning in. I'll be back later on this afternoon. Bye for now.